So in that passage of Scripture you just heard Luke read, there was a verse where Paul is encouraging his young friend Timothy, and he says to Timothy, you've got faith just like your grandmother and your mom, and that faith was passed on to you. And he says to Timothy, now remember this faith, remember this gift that you've been given. It's like a fire. Rekindle it in your life. This is World Communion Sunday, and we're celebrating that people from all tribes and languages and nations in all ages are gathering at the table today. We're going to look at a video, assuming that the technology works for us, and watch this if you would.
When I can't hold on much longer, to a rope weathered and frayed, when I can't find hope and I'm losing faith, the Savior reaches in to still the howling wind, to calm the storm within, to rescue me, to rescue me. When I think I might surrender, to the vengeance of the tide, when I'm lost in sin and I don't see light, the Savior reaches low under the torrid flow to save my sinking soul and rescue me. The Savior calls my name when I feel most ashamed. He comes to take the blame and rescue me, to rescue me, to rescue me.
Were you anxious? Were you hoping that somebody is going to stop and take communion? Were you wondering if anybody was ever going to do that? And then finally that one young man stops and asks a question, and he receives. In the church in America right now, we're pretty anxious. And we're concerned that maybe in a few years, nobody's going to stop. You may have heard of folks like Pew and Gallup who take polls, where there's a group called Barna who does that kind of stuff for churches. They used to do it for primarily very conservative evangelical churches, but they've kind of branched out, and now they just kind of do it for all churches, kind of nationwide. They've done a little bit for the United Methodist Church. And they've been producing some results from their polling that has made a lot of people anxious in the church in the United States, anxious about a particular generation, Generation Z, which are people in between the ages of 7 and 22 years old. And the reason why there's such anxiety about that particular generation, by the way, if you're here this morning and you're 7 to 22 years old, whoop, whoop. So glad to see you. The reason why many folks in the church are anxious about that generation is because of some polling stuff. That generation has seen a relatively huge bump percentage-wise in the number of atheists. Millennial generation, just before Generation Z, about 7-8%. Generation Z, about 13% atheists, about 8% agnostics. And in fact, you know the forms that you have to fill out when you do government stuff or hospital stuff, what religion are you? A third of Generation Z will select none. They have no religion. And that's made some folks anxious. Well, why is it? Not only does the polling reveal that these folks are struggling with faith, the polling tells us why they're struggling with faith. First one has been going on for a couple of generations, and that's the belief that Christians are hypocritical, that the church doesn't live up to its own teachings. Okay? Second one has been around for a couple of generations. Second reason that they identify is that the church believes stuff that's in contradiction to scientific truth. Now, there's a third reason that is a little bit unique to Generation Z. It's seen a significant increase over previous generations. Third reason why Generation Z identifies they're struggling with the church is that they're having trouble believing in a benevolent and good God in a world in which there's such evil. This is the post 9/11 generation. What if there was a church that was trying to be as welcoming as possible, that was trying to take the love of God as seriously as they could? What if there was a church that was humble about the church's hypocrisy? What if there was a church like that? What if there was a church that believed that the truth of science is not in contradiction, in fact, it's in conversation with the truth of faith, and that God reveals truth and God's self in the natural realm? What if there was a church where geeky scientific people went and had at the same time a conviction about truth of science, had a deep faith in Jesus? And what if, not pointing at anybody in particular, but what if some of them were geeky and some of them weren't so geeky, okay? Professorial types. What if there were a church that was trying really hard to help children and youth and young adults deal with the anxieties of living in a world where the threats are real? What if there were a church where in worship you could experience a God of hope, and where you could learn to pray in such a way that you could shed some of those anxieties and receive some strength? What if there were a church like that? I'm thinking that that's what Suncrest wants to be. I'd like an amen there. Yeah. Today, the church is finding out that we are once again needing to be missionaries in North America. And at Suncrest, we're trying. Over the next several Sundays, as has happened over some previous Sundays recently, you're going to see baptisms taking place where young families are bringing children to the baptismal font because they want their children exposed to that kind of faith that I just spoke of. Yeah, they want their children to make their own decisions, but they want their children surrounded by a community where there's a kind of faith that is passed on to them. On any given Sunday here at Suncrest, there's going to be about 80 children and youth that are going to walk through the doors back there and experience something here, worship or youth group or something like that. Here at Suncrest, we're going to send out our kids to do mission things. I think they're going to the Rosenbaum house today to fix meals for families who are over at the hospital. Here at Suncrest today, we'll be starting a confirmation class. And on Thursday, we'll be starting FX, which is a place for children and their parents to come to learn some of the truths of our faith together. Our youth are going to be making a difference day to day, week to week. I'll be making visits to shut-ins, and they'll tell me how the youth came to their house and raked the leaves. We'll have our youth pushing our youth leader not to just give money to causes, but rather our youth have asked that they be put in people's lives and in people's presence who need some encouragement and help. We'll have youth doing that, and we'll also have them breaking into my office and putting stuff in my chair and wrecking the place. And can we pause to celebrate that? Can we realize that not every place is experiencing that? Not every place is able to invest in the lives of children and youth. Had a parent in our congregation send me an email. She got a letter from one of our students, one of our youth's teachers, and I got it. The teacher says this: I don't know if he told you or not. Don't you hate when you're a parent and a letter begins like that? It gets better. I don't know if he told you or not, but when your child went to the book fair a couple of weeks ago, there was a boy in class who didn't have money for a book that he really wanted. And your child went back to the book fair and bought the book for him. I thought that was a very kind gesture from your child, especially since that boy wasn't one of your child's friends. It's refreshing to see moments of kindness like these from kids. And here's what Mom said to me. Now, I can tell you my child is not perfect. He is not polishing his halo at night either. But what his dad and I know for sure is that because of what he has learned through youth, through Teen Extreme, community service, the mission trip, and the church, they've helped mold him into the 13-year-old that he is today. Dad and I do our best, but it takes a village. God's village. And as I've shared with you earlier, this is yet another reason that supporting youth at Suncrest is so critical. Could we just take a moment and be grateful that that's happening here? There are children and youth and young adults who are finding at their fingertips the ability to have the faith passed on to them. A resilient faith. A faith like Timothy found in his mother and in his grandmother. A faith that he found at times needed to be rekindled because life gets hard. Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. When you pass the baton of faith on to a new generation, when you tell them the stories of Jesus, they may come back to you and say, you know, the church is being hypocritical here. And they may come back to you when you've passed the faith on to them, and they may say, you guys need to get serious about your faith. And they might come back to us and ask, are you going to be here for us? We are hurting. We are afraid. Are you going to teach us? Are you going to learn with us? Isn't it wonderful that today at this communion table, there will be children and youth and young adults and every generation meeting with Jesus.